welcome to She Thinks, a podcast where you're allowed to think for yourself. I'm your host, Beverly Hallberg, and on today's episode, we'll examine the women's groups that have remained silent on the sexual violence committed against girls and women on October 7th. And we're going to ask the big question, why hasn't the Me Too movement shown up and defended Israeli women? Really, the concern is that the whitewashing of the gravity of these crimes is degrading and dehumanizing women and puts them in danger and all across the globe. So we wanted to break that down a bit here. And joining us to talk all about it is political consultant Andi Bottner. She is the founder of Bottner Strategies, and she's an expert in women's issues and has earned the respect and admiration of some of Washington's most influential policymakers. Currently, she is a senior advisor to the Independent Women's Forum. We're glad to have her, as well as the RightNOW Women PAC. So, Andi, thank you so much for joining us to talk about a really hard topic.
Beverly, thank you so much for having me on. It's an extremely difficult and heartbreaking topic. And I think the mixed emotions of anger and despair that what occurred on October 7th, I think all of those emotions are really spilling over into the public arena, especially in the women's space. And I don't even know how to start a conversation like this, because it's just so outrageous. But I will say my heart and condolences go out to the families in Israel, the victims, the people who are still held, all the families who were torn apart by the death and the destruction and the violence. And I think we need to, especially as women, I think we need to focus on what occurred on October 7th for what that is. And that was nothing short of genocide and violence perpetrated against women.
And one of the things I wanted us to discuss just a little bit, because we're now 2 months after October 7th and more details are coming out about what took place. I want to be careful about how graphic it is, but we have testimonies from eyewitnesses who were there on the ground. There's even quite a few people who are getting mental health help in hospitals because they can't face things because they witnessed so many of these atrocities. But we also have the recordings, the GoPro cameras that the Hamas terrorists wore, other video cameras that happen to be in the kibbutzes, and also just from cell phones of people at the Nova party, and also the eyewitness reports, or the reports of those who examined the bodies when they were brought to the hospital. And we are talking about horrific sexual violence against women, against girls. I've ever heard of children, the elderly, even some men. And it seems that there was a concerted effort by these Hamas terrorists to not just kill, but to torture, and specifically torture women through rape. It's hard to fathom it all. I think the thing that is just so shocking is that so many people still don't want to admit that this happened when there is so much evidence of the atrocities.
Yeah. Well, that is systematically what we see, sadly, go on in so many different arenas, a denial of fact. And I never thought I would be someone that would sit here and applaud, Senator Clinton. But, I do today, because that is true. Some of our women leaders who tend to be on the progressive side, they have tended to very quickly come out with very little evidence in past situations and say, let's believe all women and, blah, 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 whether they're facts or not. And we see that now with many of these women who are denying reality. They don't want to hear it. They just want to look at their political situation and say, no, that didn't happen. It did happen. And if you stand for women and you want to look at the facts and say, this is nothing short of barbaric violence. These are animals that did that. They used rape as a weapon. They did it to humiliate the family members. They did it to degrade and then kill these women. They did it with children. I mean, the whole thing is just beyond comprehension. To then have a woman say, well, like we heard Pramila Jayapal, but all of the things that happened, that was terrible, and then offer excuses, political and other excuses, in a different context about why that happened. That's not how we need to look at the world. What happened was inexcusable. We have to call it out. And this is something especially where women and women leaders should be very comfortable in doing so. I mean, I have to say, Beverly,
yeah,
UN Women, there was no statement. There was no statement. And colleagues and I at the Independent Women's Forum, we sent a letter and we said just this week, where are you on this?
yeah.
Why aren't there statements? We certainly see social media activity on any other sort of issue. If a woman's even slightly involved, nothing. I mean, that is not right.
Yeah, I actually want to read a portion of the letter that many women at IWF signed on. And this was sent specifically to Jennifer Klein, the Director of Gender Policy Council at the White House, and then Seema Bauhaus, who is the Executive Director of UN Women and Undersecretary General of the United Nations. So this is just an excerpt of the letter that IW sent. And it says this, it says, all issues are women's issues, including war and terrorism. And we are horrified not only by the atrocities committed by Hamas in Israel on October 7th, including brutal, violent sexual assault, including rape of women and girls, but by the failure in too many quarters to condemn these acts. Silence is whitewashing the gravity of these crimes and sending the message that women are battlefields. And it's just a powerful statement. And I want to pick up on that, the failure in too many quarters to condemn these acts. You mentioned the former Senator Hillary Clinton has been very vocal in support of Israel and also talking about this, but plenty of groups, plenty of women aren't. Can we name drop some of the groups we would have expected to have condemnation of these sexual acts committed against women who've been silent?
Yeah, well, I have to say this is, I was on the Hill yesterday at the U.S. House and Oversight Committee hearing, and the president of the National Women's Law Center was the minority witness. She was specifically asked, and I have not seen someone so uncomfortable in trying to avoid the question. She was specifically asked about this. And it was a lot of, yes, I condemn, we condemn all violence. And I thought to myself, and then I forget, she said, but we just handle domestic issues. And I thought, my goodness, what is going on? You are out there with a megaphone on any topic as the head of the National Women's Law Center, and she had nothing to say.
Here's the question I have, because we were talking about the same people who not only support the Me Too movement, and I support men being held accountable if there are facts, so the due process, and yes, plenty of men in the past have gotten away with sexual violence against women, which is why due process is so important. But these are the same people who are willing to claim that women are always right, believe all women. They're also the same individuals who think that if you use the wrong pronouns for somebody, that's its own type of violence. So they're very vocal on so many issues. And so it begs the question, why be silent on something that is so crystal clear? What is behind it, in your opinion?
I think what is behind it, these are often people who have not had the experience, perhaps, of being faced with what the world is like for many women abroad and different cultures. These are often women who have grown up in the United States, who can talk a big game, but have never really seen the conditions and been in a culture that many millions of women live in across this country, across the world. I think it is easier to put it aside and then to put your passion toward let's say a political narrative, let's say something that will catch fire on social media, and free Palestine and chant in the streets. I bet you half of the people, probably more than half of the people who are protesting out there, they have no idea really the history and what the situation is like over there. They have none. They're out there like lemmings, just following the crowd and chanting a slogan. And it's insidious because people take up that mantle and they get the political likes and they get the adulation from those they're trying to reach, and they live in a little vacuum and they have no idea. I have to say, Beverly, for a few years, I headed up the International Women's Issues Office at the U.S. State Department. One of the best jobs ever in my life. You are never more grateful to be an American than when you have gone abroad and you have met with women who have been brutalized, mutilated. I have seen a dead body, a woman's body hanging in a square in Saudi Arabia because she was allegedly unfaithful. You don't realize what life can be like for women across the world and how good American women have it. And these poor women in Israel who were attacked for being in the wrong place and being the target of political and disgusting hatred from a terrorist organization, they didn't deserve what they got. And there's no excuse for us not to hold those perpetrators as animals accountable.
And I agree with you. I think there are those followers who just look on TikTok, those young people who think, "Oh, free Palestine, this is the social justice movement I want to get behind," without really knowing what they're saying. But there are people who are leading this. Even these women's groups who didn't speak up. It makes me wonder if there's a money trail. It makes me wonder if it's they only want to stand up for victims if it's a certain type of victim,
Oh, yeah.
that because this is Israel, because it's the Jewish people, they don't want to say anything in support of that. They know that this happened. They know it's horrific, but there's, I think, an evil premise behind it as to why they won't speak up. What do you think about the connections that maybe they're trying to not ruin by remaining silent?
Yeah, I think they're trying to have it both ways. They're going to continue taking very left-wing progressive dollars and not make waves or make any donors uncomfortable, because it is uncomfortable. If you're Hillary Clinton, you're not that uncomfortable. She's not in need, let's say, of further support, of further public adulation. She doesn't. Right? She doesn't, she's past that. So she can speak the truth. Sheryl Sandberg, who we heard this week at the UN, same kind of thing. She can speak the truth. She's not necessarily beholden to some and to funders. And I think there are a lot of people, say in the Congress and certainly in these women's organizations, that are absolutely reliant on very left-leaning, ridiculously inappropriate, very leftist progressive perspectives, and they don't want to make waves with them.
And I want to mention not just Hillary Clinton. We've seen other Democrats who have been very supportive of Israel. Senator John Fetterman has been very vocal of his
Yes.
support of Israel and talking about Hamas being a terrorist organization that committed horrendous crimes. Where do you think the Democrat Party goes? Because it really is splitting down the extreme progressives and even very liberal Democrats, but more traditional Democrats who do believe in human rights.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, Senator Fetterman is, again, not someone I think I would ever agree with, but I really applaud him for his support. Senator Gillibrand of New York, she was another one that came out and in support. And I think there is most definitely that I think kind of a cabal in the Democratic Party, especially in the US Congress right now. You know, we call them the squad, you know, and they've got a lot of these are newer members, they're younger members, they're not particularly informed members, but they're all about throwing the bombs, you know, being on social media, and kind of blowing up things. And that it keeps them in good standing, you know, with the progressives in the district. So I think there's most definitely a split. And even for the other side, you know, for the Republican Party, I just want to call out. I mean, we've had Elise Stefanik, you know, yesterday really going at a lot of these academic leaders and saying, what is going on with this anti-Semitism, you know, that you're allowing to run rampant on campuses. I was with Senator Katie Britt, new Senator Alabama, last night. She had a book come out. I don't think I've ever heard anybody speak as passionately and emotionally as Senator Britt did, you know, after coming back from a foreign trip, and seeing what happened and learning about what happened in October. So, you know, there are courageous women leaders, you know, on both sides of the aisle. And I think the cabal of people who are just spewing poison are those that need to be shut down.
And I think we can take a good point from it as well, and that is we can't let this slide. We have to get people on record who are at least being silent or saying appalling things like Congresswoman Jayapal, who has said many things that are concerning. I think it's so important to call it out and ask questions and put them on record. I think that's a big part of it, because this leads to my question, and you've seen this in your past work. If we accept this as a society or downplay it or minimize it or both and it and say, well, the Palestinians haven't been treated properly, so this is what happens. What happens to women in future wars, current and future wars, if this isn't condemned? How important is it for the United States as a whole, but also the international community, to condemn sexual violence against women as a weapon of war?
Yeah, we have to do that. It has to be condemned. And I was saying to actually my college age daughter, and in a university and a lot of the campus politics going on, I said, look, there's a time and a place. You can have all sorts of conversations about past, political and the historical context, between different countries. Sure, that's a political debate. That's something that can continue on, and countries will figure out. There has to be right and wrong, though. So you can say, I might be more sympathetic, to this group's plight or that group's plight, but at the end of the day, there is still right and wrong. And what happened on October 7th was wrong. War crimes occurred. It was an attempt at genocide. That the bright line has to be drawn. Right? So you recognize what happened. Israel needs to respond to that, just like we did after September 11th. Can you imagine? Can you imagine after those towers came down, if people said, well, you guys have just been too bossy around the world for decades. You kind of had it coming. America got too big for its britches. You should wait before responding. I mean, that's insane. And this is what some are trying to do to Israel. This occurred on October 7th. It needs to be addressed. All of the excuses and trying to whitewash why it happened, there are none. You have to look at it for what it is, the actions that occurred on October 7th, and react accordingly. And when we do that, we draw a line and we put down a marker that will hopefully protect women into, future wars, future conflicts, where the international community can say, hey, this is something that doesn't fly. We can't accept that. Otherwise, we're right back where we were decades ago. I mean, this has been people's life work. Rape can't be used as a weapon of war. It is, but it can't be. And I mean, we have to call that out.
Yeah. And my final question for you is, I'm curious about your level of surprise that this seems to be hard for people, that this isn't crystal clear, regardless of how you vote. This is just a human response, should be that using sexual violence in war is not okay. I mean, I'm surprised by the level of anti-Semitism in the United States. I am
Yes.
surprised that we have sitting members of Congress that do not want to condemn the totality of what took place. Again, you can have a political discussion about the conflicts between Israel and surrounding areas, including Gaza. But when you're talking about the level of torture and cruelty that we saw, I'm shocked, I have to admit.
I'm with you, Beverly. I mean, I've seen some bad things and witnessed some bad things. And immediately after just hearing the stories, the level of brutality, and again, like barbarism. I mean, this is medieval stuff that was going on. I mean, it is shocking to me that people will turn a blind eye in the name of politics. And that's what's going on. And that's why we have to be even louder and demand accountability and demand answers and action. I'm waiting to hear from the White House Gender Policy Council.
Right.
because we, as of right now, maybe something came in today, but we've not heard a word. And frankly, I haven't heard loud enough remarks from, the gentleman sitting in the White House or his VP, a woman VP. It's not, sadly, that's not too surprising to me, because I just don't think either of them are, particularly passionate or engaged on any issue. But it's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. And we've got to just keep drawing attention to it. And I will say a dear colleague of ours at Independent Women's Forum, a fellow there, Dr. Quanta Ahmad, has a Washington Post editorial that ran. She's been over there, and it is chilling to read the op-ed that she recently, had published. And she raises the point. I think tomorrow is the first night of Hanukkah, and she made the point. She said, we're celebrating Hanukkah, and you think about what they've gone through, and you wonder what it's going to look like for them a year from now, 6 months from now, 2 years from now. So anyway, tomorrow, first night of Hanukkah in 2 months, marks the 2-month anniversary of October 7th. So my heart and feelings and prayers go to our Jewish friends and colleagues. And I just hope that what we can do here will help keep this conversation going and spur action.
When the excerpt that I read from that letter, it's once again another reason why I'm proud to be part of Independent Women's Forum, because we have women like that who are willing to speak up and are speaking truth. So I'm thankful to be part of IWF, and I'm thankful that you are part of it, and also for joining us today, Andi Bottner. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Beverly. Have a good evening.
You too. And thank you all for joining us. Before you go, IWF does want you to know that we rely on the generosity of supporters like you. An investment in IWF fuels our efforts to enhance freedom, opportunity, and well-being for all Americans. So please consider making a small donation to IWF by visiting IWF.org/donate. That is IWF.org/donate. Last, if you enjoyed this episode of She Thinks, do leave us a rating or review. It does help. And we'd love it if you shared this episode so your friends can know where they can find more She Thinks. From all of us here at IWF, thanks for watching.